By all accounts, as it is written, Jezebel was a faithful, dutiful wife who fiercely defended her husband's interests. And yet the book of Revelations calls her a fornicator, an adulterer, a false teacher, a seducer. Now, both of these things cannot be true. Or can they? Let's get into it. The story of Queen Jezebel begins in the first book of Kings, chapter 16. She was the daughter of King of Sidonia, which makes her a Gentile and a Canaanite. She was married to Ahab, king of Israel. Now, we have to get into a little background before you can understand anything about this parable. So we're going to go on a quick detour back to Abraham, who was a Hindu Brahmin. Now, the Hindu culture practices a patriarchal caste system or hierarchy. It's called a Varna. At the top of this hierarchical pyramid is the priest class, or Brahmins. These are those who sit in the seat of God, as God. Abraham was a Brahmin, as attested by Jesus in John 8:58, where he tells the Levites, "Truly, truly, I have told you before, Abraham is I am." Jesus tells us that Abraham, a Brahmin, is Jehovah, God of the Levites. And they are so enraged, they pick up stones to stone him. Now, beneath the Brahmin caste on this hierarchy is the ruler caste, kings, governors, warlords. Beneath them is the merchant class, farmers, traders, merchants. And fourth and last in the Varna is a skilled labor caste, artisans, laborers, servants. Now, this pyramid is separate from, but sits on a foundation called Dalit, which means broken, shattered, divided. This is the caste of the untouchables. Now, the untouchables have their own hierarchy within its own class. And it looks something a little like this. And I'm going to tell you right now, I just made this up. I pulled it out of my hat. This is how I envision the Dalit hierarchy. Men at the top, beneath them, the servants of men, beneath them, beggars and the indigent, beneath them, on the final level of the pyramid, holy animals, cows, dogs, snakes, elephants. And then below that, as the foundation upon which that entire pyramid sits, is women. These Dalit women were referred to as the Dalit of Dalits, or the slave of slaves. And they were holding up the weight of two patriarchal structures on their backs. The word caste began as Portuguese, meaning race, lineage, or breed. It was used by the Iberians to designate purity in the context of bloodlines, racial purity. Now, racial purity is only achieved through endogamy, which is also known as inbreeding. The word caste and the word chaste are the same word with the same meaning. They mean purity or cleanness of the bloodlines, meaning inbred. I'm serious. I wish it was a joke. So chastity culture is Hindu caste culture. That's its origin, that's its meaning. And a clean, pure, and chaste woman is one who has a clean, pure bloodline, stays in her caste, and marries and breeds among her own caste. The idea of chastity is at its core racism and eugenics. Now, the word Varna, which describes this patriarchal caste hierarchy, is the root word of fornication. The V and the F are phonetically interchangeable when we are transcribing languages, making fornication the act of varnication, or doing or making Varna, a caste system, a pyramid, a hierarchy, a patriarchal hierarchy. So fornication is the act of doing, creating, or making varna. To commit varna, or fornication, is a sin of pride. A hierarchy requires a dom and a sub, someone who has dominion and someone who is subjugated. Without both, a dom and a sub, no hierarchy can exist. So taking dominion over another is an act of pride, the first of the 7 deadly sins. And subjugating another is a function of sadism, which is wrath, another of the 7 deadly sins. Pride was the sin of Sodom and Gomorrah. They were destroyed because they practiced varna, fornication, hierarchy, patriarchy, and subjugation. This is evidenced by the story of Lot and his 2 daughters. When Lot and his 2 male messengers feared for their lives, Lot gave his daughters to wicked and abusive men to save himself and his friends. Ezekiel 16:56 says, "For the sisters of Sodom were not even mentioned by your mouth in the day of your pride." If you haven't heard of the sisters of Sodom, who got thrown out to the abusers and the wicked men to save Lot and his friends, it's because your teachers are sons of pride who believe Lot was justified in saving himself at the expense of his girl daughters. Now, Ezekiel also says in 1649, the brides of Sodom are troubled. The sisters of Sodom break bread with the proud and gluttonous, and they hold their peace and appease and pacify them. They do not have a firm hand, but are oppressed and abused, and they exalt those who commit abominations before their faces. Their grief is great, and their rebellion is good. This is my interpretation taken from the original Hebrew language. Nobody else's. All right, so Ezekiel also compares Samaria to Sodom, which is very important in the story of Jezebel. King Ahab built a shrine and an altar in Samaria, and this act signaled his submission to the Brahmin caste and his subjugation to the hierarchy of the Hindu Varna caste system. So he sold Israel into slavery for riches. Now, Jezebel married into this disaster of a man and this disaster of a nation. And her sin was the sin of the daughters of Sodom. She saw that her husband was a wicked man, but she continued to break bread with him, to appease him, to hold her tongue, to allow his iniquity. She was a soothsayer. She soothed him with her words. Today we call that fawning. As it is written, King Ahab, who owned the whole land and was very rich, wanted one tiny little vineyard he didn't own. It was owned by Naboth. Now, this was envy and greed and covetousness on the part of Ahab, who was a very wicked man. It was sin. So Naboth refused to give him his vineyard. So King Ahab went home and entered into the house of Jezebel, his wife. And as it is written, he was implacable and enraged. Then he ravished her in the bedchamber and then drove her away from his face and refused to eat. And Jezebel kept her peace. She brought him bread and wine and placated and soothed him and reminded him he was the great big king of Israel. And then she said, "I can get the vineyard for you." And she did. She was a woman under authority who used the authority of her husband and his signet ring to get him what he wanted. Now, if that doesn't describe a dutiful and faithful wife, I don't know what does. 1 Kings 21:26 says, "There was none like Ahab, who sold himself to work evil, whom Jezebel his wife did soothe." That word soothe there also means to seduce, to lead into iniquity. So the sin of Jezebel was obedience to her wicked, abusive, oppressive husband. Her sin was making and keeping peace with a wicked man and marrying into a patriarchal hierarchy and allowing it to subjugate her and silence her voice. Her sin was following her husband instead of righteousness, becoming a mouthpiece for her patriarchy and subjugation. Now, the letter to Thyatira in Revelation says that obedient and faithful wives of the patriarchy have no place in the church. They are a problem. They seduce the good Jesus-believing Christians into practicing fornication or subjugation. Now, modern-day Jezebels you can view in real time include MAGA women working in the MAGA sphere. They just keep speaking soothing words to the wicked, doing wicked deeds. They just keep obeying unrighteousness as if they will be rewarded for that. So yes, Jezebel both was a faithful and dutiful wife who looked out for her husband's interests, but she was also a fornicator, soothsayer, seducer, peacemaker, and legendary pick-me girl. The Jezebels are called to repent and stop condoning and being complicit with their own destruction. In conclusion, Jesus instructed his followers not to give their daughters to the sons of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, whom he called swine, saying, "Don't give your daughters to the swine, who will trample them under their feet and subjugate them, for they will also kill them." Thank you for listening. I hope you like this. Like my video, subscribe to my channel for more Bible lessons. This is the Bible Literacy Project, where we teach the Bible as it is written and not as it has been imagined.